Globally, trash pickers outnumber official waste workers 4 to 1. They collect more than half of all the plastic that gets recycled around the world. They are essential, but most of them are unpaid, and many live in poverty.
Sampah itu alhamdulillah berkah.
Ngapain?
Ya udah pada makan dulu. Enak dari sono juga.
Now, a 30-year fight for fair wages and legal protection has given waste pickers their first international union.
Tous les jours, ce que tu veux, faut bara sur les mains. Si tu as bon sentiment, bara.
This push to organize follows efforts in places like Colombia and Brazil, where workers fought and won to be recognized by the government. But what will it take to organize more than 20 million people across dozens of countries? And how will it impact the way the world handles trash?
The Bantar Gebang landfill near Jakarta is the size of 200 football fields. It's one of the largest in the world. Around 6,000 people live in slums at its base. Indan has been living here for 2 years. At first, he was afraid to eat the food he collected from the mountain. But now,
Yang tadi kita nemu itu alhamdulillah enak. Tadi saya nemu semacam wortel, bakso, terus kol. Bismillahirrohmanirrohim. Allahumma barik lana fima rojaktana wa qina adzabannar.
Ngapain?
Ya udah pada makan dulu. Enak dari sono juga. Ini dapat mungut. Pernah sekali saya bawa makanan nyampe sini, tahu-taunya makanan udah nggak layak dimakan. Saya umpetin, ketemu sama anak, langsung dimakan, jadinya mencret.
a few houses away, Rasidin is getting ready to go out for the day.
Halo, kaos kaki, bolong sepatunya, Bu. Karena apa? Kalau nggak dikasih plastik, pasti tembus ke kaki. Makanya Bapak dikasih plastik.
Kenapa, Pak? Kenapa nggak?
Karena nggak ada duitnya. Mencukup segitu uangnya.
Dulu ya Bu ya,
Iya,
berangkat
hati-hati
kerja,
ya, Kak.
doain ya Bu ya.
Ya,
Biar
mudah-mudahan
banyak.
paling sehat.
Amin.
Berdoalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allah ya Allah, ya Allahku, ya Allah ya Allah, ya Allah. Mugi-mugi dikabulkan ya Allah, Allah ya Allah. Mohon dikabulkan ya Allah.
1,300 trucks arrive here every day, mostly from Indonesia's capital, Jakarta. People doing this work call themselves pemulung, which translates to scavenger. They work independently but need permission from the government to enter the landfill. The biggest dangers on the job are the excavators. They are owned and operated by the Jakarta provincial government. They move the trash around so that this mountain doesn't collapse. Dani Kurniawan has been operating one of them for 18 years.
Jadi dengan adanya pemulung lumayan juga sih banyak fungsinya. Banyak semacam kayak plastik kan dikumpul sama mereka. Jadi mengurangi volume sampah ya dari dia orang. Makanya kita sebagai pekerja di sini ya biasa aja. Karena posisinya kita di sini udah tahunan ya. Jadi sama pemulung udah kayak keluarga aja. Kita nggak bisa, apalagi posisi malam nih ya. Begitu kita garuk, ada kayu, apa beling, apa batu, ya kan. Kita garuk, kita angkat, tiba-tiba jatuh kena pemulung. Itu resiko saya.
Rasidin had a close call once.
Cara ngindarinya Bapak ke bawah, didorong sama bucket. Cuman salahnya ada bangkolan dari nyangkut, ada kayu, terus kelinjang iketannya itu nyangkut. Jadi Bapak ngegantung, nyelamatin Bapak anak, semua datang.
But he continues to work near them because they usually operate where new trash arrives.
Ya apa aja, botol, tulang, ya seadanya aja di Bulog, yang bara pasti dijual gitu.
Recycling facilities mostly take bottles, cardboard, and metal. But local artisans will pay good money for bones to make jewelry.
Dulu mah memang iya masih bawa muntah-muntah, sekarang mah ya udah kalau omongan kasar tuh bangbal gitu. Udah tebel, bener Ibu. Ya rasanya puyeng. Ya paling kalau udah puyeng ya pengen pulang.
Methane's an invisible threat at Bantar Gebang. The gas comes from rotting food, wood, and paper. When there's too much of it, people can suffocate. And it can cause deadly eruptions. In 2005, trapped methane exploded at a dump site in Java and triggered an avalanche that buried dozens of homes and killed 143 people. Most of them were scavengers living near the landfill. But nothing stops Rasidin from coming to work.
Ya pernah kehujanan, keanginan. Kadang-kadang mau pulang aja hujan, ayo macok terus nyari emberan.
He makes around $25 a week. That's about a third of Indonesia's minimum wage, but still more than what farmers make.
Kalau Bapak sebenarnya lebih baik mulung daripada nggak makan.
Waduh, kayaknya lelah banget ini.
Ya, capean bos. Panas.
14 kilo.
14 kilo ya?
Iya.
Ya udah, lumayan. Berapa sih harganya?
Rasidin sells his goods to middlemen like Adi, who then sells them to another trash buyer. As many as 20,000 families here depend on Bantar Gebang to make a living. This land used to be mostly forest and rice fields until the 1980s. Trash has been piling up ever since.
Ya bagaimana berhentinya kalau masih begini ceritanya mah nggak ada berhentinya. Kecuali kalau udah tua baru nggak boleh sama anak. Kalau sekarang juga nggak boleh, cuman terpaksa masa mengarepin aja anak.
Rasidin has 5 children, and he dreams they might one day make it out of here.
Ada yang jadi pemulung, orang tua pemulung, anaknya jadi pemulung. Ada yang bawa alat berat, ada yang bawa alat nyupir sampah, ada alat berat, ada yang masih sekolah, ada 2 yang udah kerja, ada belum pada sukses. Ya dongain aja Bu,
Bapak biar selamat usahanya.
Ya udah, masuk.
And Indan has a message for the wealthy.
Maaf sama orang-orang kaya ini. Kalau beli makanan jangan banyak-banyak. Secukupnya aja buat anaknya. Jangan dibuang, sayang. Jangan dibuang dulu, kasih orang-orang yang susah seperti aku ini.
Waste pickers in many places have no other way to earn money.
Scavenging for rusted scrap metal is one of the only ways widows in Jakarta can make money. The women search for iron and steel from used ships in one of the most polluted waters in the world. Datri is 63 years old, but she has been the main breadwinner for her 3 kids since her husband died.
Kadang-kadang saya cuma keluarin air mata aja ya susah. Iya. Kadang sampai saya kadang bingung. Kadang saya bingung ya.
Everything she touches has poisonous layers of rust.
Ini masih ada tuh. Nih, tuh. Ini baru dikelekep.
Ship recycling is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. And massive yards across the world break down everything from cruise liners, cargo vessels, and oil tankers to naval warships. But these women make only about $2 a day selling small pieces. So why are so many widows stuck scavenging like this? And what makes it such a risky business? Every morning, Datri leaves her 10-month-old granddaughter behind and goes to work. She has always had a job, even before she got married at 19.
Ke Jakarta karena saya kan pengen ngikut suami nyari makan sendiri.
But things have been tough since her husband passed away 13 years ago. Widows often struggle to find jobs in Indonesia because many believe they can bring bad luck. But the owner of this shipbreaking company lets widows scavenge for free.
8. Iya, sekarang ada 8.
Pernah rebutan nggak?
Enggak bareng-bareng aja.
The women are only allowed to collect small pieces like these. The larger chunks belong to the ship owners to sell or reuse.
Kalau segini, tahuan, domelin, nggak boleh, aku di stop. Gak penuhin karungnya.
Most of the valuable pieces are underwater near the ships. Datri uses a magnetic stick to find the metal.
Paling parah kalau lagi licin, banyak oli, lumpur, jalannya susah. Aku sakit, takut kepleset.
"13 rivers empty into Jakarta Bay, carrying with them sewage, toxins, and all kinds of trash. Datri's thick gloves and socks don't always protect her. Once, she stepped on a nail that went right through her foot.
Saya sampai 5 bulan nggak sembuh. Sampai dibawa suntik ke PPP Rumah Sakit Pelabuhan.
Welders are constantly sawing off hot pieces of metal, so she has to be careful.
Nembus. Jadi nempel.
Datri says even though the job is dangerous, she's still proud of making her own money.
Karena cari makan. Biar makan gimana caranya. Yang penting masih sehat hidup.
Around noon, the women escape the heat with a quick lunch break. There are about 10 million widows like them across Indonesia, and most live in extreme poverty. Some turn to sex work to survive. Others are forced to send their children to work to make ends meet. Amina wanted to avoid that, so she took this job at the scrapyard 37 years ago.
Jadinya udahlah, saya lebih baik nyari karat. Ya anak-anak ibaratnya ditinggal pada sekolah.
Today, at 61 years old, she has many health issues, including severe arthritis.
Kaki ini nih, kadang-kadang bengkak. Kalau nggak di sini bengkak, di sini bengkaknya. Jalan-jalan bengkaknya. Pokoknya nggak bisa nggak minum obat.
And she's afraid she will run out of breath and drown because she has heart problems.
Karena kalau kumat, udah dari sini masuk ke sini, nusuk ke belakang. Panas perih, sakitnya kayak apa.
On a really good day, she collects as much as 200 kilograms and sells it for almost $3. With that, she can buy about 4 cups of rice for dinner. Her salary isn't enough to pay for her treatments. But she's too sick to find another job.
Berdiri, kalau gosok kan berdiri. Nggak kuat kakinya. Kerja lain kerja apa sih, Nak? Nyuci, gosok saya nggak bisa.
Nowadays, her children work, but Amina still helps with all the bills. And she'd rather scavenge than go into debt.
Enggak, saya nggak kapok. Sayang lah ibaratnya di rumah deh, bengang-bengong.
The widows sell the rusted scraps to Narwin, a middleman.
Kalau kualitas karat yang bagus ya dia bening, nggak kotor, nggak hitam. Kalau yang jelek ya hitam, kotor.
This is one of 2 shipbreaking yards in Jakarta. It takes 20 workers at least a week to cut down an entire ship, depending on its size. Most ships have a lifespan of 25 to 30 years, after which they are retired. But they have hazardous materials inside. Things like asbestos in pipes, heavy metals in paints, biological hazards from sewage tanks, radioactive material from gauges, and the list goes on. Left unchecked, they can seep into the soil, beach, and water near shipbreaking yards and destroy local marine habitats. But there are also many usable parts of a ship, including metal bars and plates. Those are recycled and sometimes used to make new ships or heavy machinery. Experts say this is a greener alternative to producing new steel, which uses a lot of energy. And it also saves the planet from more metal mining. So while workers like Datri and Amina play a crucial role in building a more sustainable industry, the profits and the praise are not trickling down to them. Both widows live in this colony. It's one of the poorest areas in Jakarta. Most of their neighbors also break down ships at the scrapyard or fish along the coast. Datri raised her 3 sons here mostly on her own. Her husband died when the youngest was just 11. And she never considered marrying again.
Karena dulu suami saya galak. Saya pernah ditonjok, pernah diapa, pernah. Saya seneng itu piara anak sendiri, yang penting bisa makan. Turun mau makan, ibunya mau berangkat nih. Turun. Buburnya.
Now her kids are all grown up. But she shares her home with one of her sons and helps support his wife and their baby.
Nenek mau berangkat jam ya. Ini tangan bagus ya.
Menurut saya sih Bu Datri harusnya nggak usah kerja. Tapi mau gimana lagi, namanya ngebantu untuk kerja, ngehidupin sehari-hari. Kasian aja, udah tua, umur udah kayak gitu, terus harus banting tulang.
Her other kids rely on her too.
Kemarin aja punya cincin 3 gram ya. Anak saya tuh kontrakan, daripada diusir orang saya kasihin. Benar. Udah mendingan saya lebaran gak pakai cincin daripada anak saya diusir orang. Itu boleh ngumpulin cincin.
Datri says her faith in God has helped her through the tough times.
Ya itu terserah yang kuasa yang ngatur saya masih sehat. Yang penting masih sehat hidup. Alhamdulillah. Amin aja.
Globally, many waste pickers are children and teens. In India, students break down e-waste after school to earn cash.
Most of India's electronic waste ends up in northeast Delhi's Selampur neighborhood. Nearly 50,000 people dig through the trash here every day. Many of them are teenagers, all searching for old cell phones, computers, and video game controllers. Gulzar's hands are so damaged from years of prying them apart that his fingerprints have worn away.
जब मैंने पत्ता तोड़ना स्टार्ट करा था तब हाथ कटने लगे थे ना यहाँ पे, तो मोबाइल जब फिंगरप्रिंट लगाता था चलता नहीं था, मोबाइल खुलता नहीं था जल्दी.
Few have gloves or other safety equipment. The health risks are one of the reasons why Gulzar hasn't told his mother he still works here.
मम्मी कहती है काम मत करो, पढ़ाई कर लो और नौकरी मिल जाएगी तुम्हें बढ़िया वाली.
Most of his friends also scavenge for a living, like Alim, who stopped going to school because his father got tuberculosis 3 years ago. That's why his family sent him to work, even though he was just 16. Now, Alim breaks down up to 150 of these phones every day.
ये होता है एक पत्ता, मोबाइल का पत्ता, जो इससे ऐसे अलग करना पड़ता है. ये होती बॉडी, ये होता पत्ता.
Old electronics have high levels of mercury, cadmium, and lead, which can harm the kidneys. But they also hold precious metals. Usually, Alim can collect up to 11 pounds of mixed scrap, which he sells for $6 a day to a middleman at Ghaffar Market. It's famous for cheap electronics, and many e-waste devices are refurbished and sold here. China, the US, and India are the biggest generators of e-waste. But only 17% of electronics discarded globally were recycled in 2019. Much of it is illegally shipped to developing countries. where it's sorted by informal workers. But they don't have the knowledge or the tools to safely handle it. So a lot of it ends up in landfills. Sustainability expert Panni Verma says that's contaminating the environment.
Air, water, soil, all three of them are getting badly affected.
Sometimes they burn the waste that they cannot resell.
This is going into the nostrils. It's leading to stunted growth in children. It's leading to miscarriages in women. It's leading to organ damage. It's leading to bone density loss.
And most electronics are coated in flame retardants that release poisonous gases when burned.
It's also affecting the human body. Skin diseases, different types of cancers, they are happening because of the contaminations.
The waste has also polluted water sources like the nearby Yamuna River.
They acid wash the motherboards to take out the metals, the precious metals, and then they just drain it into any kind of a water body.
With global e-waste expected to increase 38% by the end of the decade, India implemented new rules to regulate recycling facilities. But they don't impact informal workers. Nor do they address child labor in the industry. Children as young as 14 are allowed to work in India, but not in hazardous conditions like these.
It kind of has become a work of generations, one generation to next, to next, to next. There has to be talks of these young children working to go study.
But going to school is not an option for Aleem. His mother, Gulshan Bano, sells vegetables to get by.
जो मैं कमाती हूँ वो किराया चला जाता है, जो लड़का कमाता है घर में खर्चा उठ जाता है, वो भी कभी पूरा होता कभी नहीं होता.
Aleem's friend Gulzar still goes to school. And he has dreams of a better life.
Thousands of people risk their lives collecting trash in one of India's largest landfills. They sort all kinds of waste, even used syringes. In recent years, fires have become more and more common, threatening people who work here and live nearby.
जलन इतनी हो रही है कि आदमी बस मजबूरी है घर तो छोड़ ही सकते हैं हम.
The Balswa landfill burned for 2 months starting in April. When temperatures soared over 110 degrees Fahrenheit in New Delhi.
मुश्किल तो आता है, बदबू मारता है.
Sahabuddin lost plastic and scrap metal he'd been collecting for years.
होगा 1,500 का, नहीं तो कम से 70-80 हज़ार रुपये का तो मेरा कबाड़ा जल गया.
Firefighters extinguished the open flames after about 2 weeks. But people here are still struggling to breathe because they've lived next to the smoldering plumes the whole time.
उसकी लाइफ तो समझिए बहुत ही नर्क लाइफ है.
As garbage piles up and the planet warms, landfill fires are expected to get worse. We went to India to meet the people who make their living next to a flaming mountain of worldwide waste. Every day, the tens of millions of people that live in the city of Delhi generate 10,000 metric tons of waste. Nearly all of it ends up in one of 3 surrounding landfills.
Now, most of these dump sites have gone beyond their capacity and they're overflowing with waste. And that's the real problem today.
Balswa was supposed to close more than 10 years ago, but it keeps accepting garbage, up to 600 truckloads every day. Backhoe operators like Rahul move the waste to make pathways for the trucks to drive to the top.
जनता के लिए काम कर रहे हैं, सब बना रहे हैं रास्ते.
Around 75,000 people, known in India as rag pickers, make their living in Delhi's dumps.
सारा बिकता है, ऐसा कुछ बात नहीं है. जब अब 1 रुपए किलो बिके, चाहे 8 ना, सब बिक रहा है. जब
देखो जी, मेन तो हमारा स्क्रैप का काम है, प्लास्टिक का भी है, मतलब रद्दी का भी है, हर चीज़ का है, लेकिन अपना मटेरियल अलग अलग करके जब बेचता हूँ.
The average rag picker earns 200 to 300 rupees a day, about $3 to $4, with plastic and metal being the most valuable items collected. Even when they're not on fire, the landfills pose major health risks.
हाँ, मक्खियाँ भी हैं, मक्खियों की से भी दिक्कत है. सुबह क्या, शाम क्या, दोपहर क्या, हर टाइम में मक्खी रहती है. देख भी रहोगे आप लोग यहाँ पे, इससे भी दिक्कत है. अब ये क्या, ये मक्खी गंदगी तो है ही है, गंदगी की वजह से ही खाने वाने पे बैठती है, तो उससे भी दिक्कत ही है हम लोगों को. ये तो सब चीज़ से दिक्कत है यहाँ पे.
Dr. Jivasau has been treating patients who work at the Balswell landfill for over 20 years.
डेली कमाते हैं, डेली खाते हैं, मजबूरी है. जो बहुत लेबर क्लास के लोग ऐसे ऐसे 10 दिन महीना दिन कमाया खाया, और जो कुछ बचता है लेकर के गाँव भाग जाते, गाँव देहात चले जाते.
Balswa doesn't have a proper drainage system, so runoff from the landfill makes its way into the groundwater.
पानी यहाँ बहुत ही बेकार आता है. दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट के भी पानी बेकार आती है, और ऑलरेडी यहाँ तो ज़मीन के जो पानी है लोग ले ही नहीं पाते, कारण ज़मीन के पानी इतनी कड़वी और इतनी जहर है, तो ज़मीन के पानी तो लोग इस्तेमाल नहीं करते हैं.
Scientists use the Air Quality Index, or AQI, to measure air pollution, and India has one of the worst measures in the world. One study said air pollution led to more than 1.6 million premature deaths in 2019. Then there's the odor.
स्मेल की भी गंध जो होती है, उसकी महक वो भी बर्दाश्त नहीं होती है. जब आग लगती है तो उसकी भी महक बर्दाश्त नहीं होती बिल्कुल भी.
Not to mention the everyday dangers of rag picking.
हर तरीके की परेशानी, कहाँ तक परेशानी बताएं आपको. ये देखो, और दिखाऊँ आपको, पैरों में देख लो, ये देखो. डर तो हमेशा, आपको पता ही है कि डर हमेशा इंसान को रहती है.
So, how did the landfill fires start? Lithium-ion batteries, which are increasingly entering the waste stream, can spontaneously explode. But in India, the brutal heat wave was the most likely culprit.
कोई लगाता नहीं है यहाँ पर आग. क्यों? इससे तो हमारा काम चलता है. इससे तो हम 2-4 रुपए कमा के अपना पेट भरते हैं.
In addition to plastic and other trash, the methane from decomposing garbage fuels fire. And these fumes contain all kinds of chemicals, which can cause tuberculosis in the short term and cancer if inhaled over a long period of time.
हाँ, लगाते हैं, हमारे बच्चे लगाते हैं, स्कूल जाते हैं तो लगाते हैं. नहीं, पार्क वार्क तो यहाँ कोई नहीं है. बच्चे खेलते ही नहीं है, फिर तो टाइम ही नहीं मिलता. पहली बात तो इतना, बच्चे स्कूल जाते हैं, स्कूल से घर पे होमवर्क.
The fires make a bad situation worse.
नहीं तो धुआं इतना होता था, पहले रह नहीं पाते थे. इसलिए क्या करूं, कबाड़ा बचाऊं, क्या धुएं से मरूं.
Sahebuddin has lived and worked at Balswa all his life.
अब क्या करूं, अपना माँ बाप तो अपना ज़िंदगी हमारा बनाया ही नहीं. ठीक है, 1984 से मेरा यहाँ, ये मेरे 2 भाई का जन्म है. यहाँ का पैदाशी मैं, इसी यहाँ का पैदाशी मैं हूँ. ठीक है, इसी जगह का.
He set aside a large pile of scrap metal and plastic as a kind of life savings he was planning on trading in. Then the fires came.
जब से कबाड़ा चुगना जलने के लिए, जब मेरा कबाड़ा जल गया, जब से मेरा नुकसान हो गया, तब से मैंने कबाड़ा चुगना बंद कर दिया. मंडी में जाता हूँ, भीख मांगता हूँ.
Putting out these fires requires a lot of manpower and equipment.
मेरा काम यही है कि कहीं आग लगे, वहाँ जाके आग बुताओ. मशीन से बुताते हैं. 9 से 8 बजे 6 बजे तक रहते हैं, फिर अपने अपने रूम पे जाते हैं सर.
It took 80 trucks and 200 firefighters to quench the flames that burned from April to June. But mostly, these fires fizzle out on their own.
हाँ, पहले भी मतलब 4-5 दिन लगे थे, अब क्या तो भैया वो एक महीना से ही होने को आ रहा है धीरे-धीरे करके। पिछले साल भी लगी थी, जब हम आए थे यहाँ पे, जब भी लगी थी, और इस साल तो और ज़्यादा ही लगी है।
It is only improves in certain months which are in and around monsoon. After the monsoon, you'll find that, because of the heavy rainfall, it subsides and your particulate matter goes down and the air quality just comes up a little bit. So the respite is for a brief period.
Locals want these sites removed.
गवर्नमेंट से यही कहेंगे कि इसको या तो हटा दो या फिर यहाँ कुछ बनवा दो, जिससे मतलब पेड़ पौधे लगा दो, जैसा शुद्ध हवा आए, इससे वातावरण अच्छा हो, तो सबको मतलब खुशहाली मिलेगी इस चीज़ से।
And the local government was fined nearly $65,000 for not taking proper measures to prevent the fire. The Delhi government told us it's working to remove all 8 million metric tons of waste from this site by the end of 2023. Since 2019, the government has operated what are known as trommels that separate recyclable trash from what can be burned to create energy. The rest of the leftovers are supposed to get moved to a different dump site. Delhi plans on opening another waste processing facility here by 2025 and is supposed to expand services for rag pickers. Activists say one solution to the ever-growing landfill is separating the waste before it gets there.
If you can reduce the waste amount by taking away the recyclables and the wet waste or the bio waste, very small quantities will go to the landfill.
Despite the increasing garbage problem, the amount of waste Indians create per person is far lower than richer countries. Every day, the average American throws out 8 times as much plastic garbage as the average Indian. But India's recycling industry is kept afloat by informal rag pickers who make pennies a day.
तो कबाड़ा तो अगर नहीं चुगा जाएगा तो बहुत दिक्कत है। इससे तो बहुत जो चुगने वाले से लेके फैक्ट्री वाले तक, तो इससे तो बहुत बड़े-बड़े पैसे वाले लगे जुड़े पड़े हैं।
For years, India's federal government has tried to crack down on waste with tougher laws, banning most single-use plastic.
I think everything has been prescribed, but unfortunately, it's the state government and the municipal people who are not following the rules at this point of time.
While these solutions are debated and parts of the landfill continue to smolder, the people dependent on it go out for another day of work because they have no other choice.
काम ही यही है, ये तो जलता ही रहता है, कभी पत्थर आके गिर रहा है, कभी आग जल रही है, तो ऐसा तो चलता ही रहता है।
इतना मेहनत है बाबूजी, अब हम कहाँ करें, हमारे बात तो कोई सुनवाई नहीं है। इस ज़माने में वही तो बात है ना, जिसका पैसा है उसी का वोट है, जिसका पैसे नहीं है उसका कुछ नहीं है इस दुनिया के अंदर।
हो सकती पर क्या करें, इतना मजबूरी है तो चलाना ही पड़ेगा।
बेकार है भाई साहब, ये ज़िंदगी से बेकार है, फिर भी इंसान क्या करे, पेट तो पालना ही है।
Millions of mines and unexploded grenades are scattered across Afghanistan. Now, people like Salim Pandikhail scavenge the ground for weapons that contain treasure.
په مینو کې زیات راځي هغه مونږ چې نو باسو بیا ځکه هغه د مرګ خطر هم لري خو بیا لیک پیسې هم جوړوي.
Salim sells the copper to scrapyards. From there, it's transported to factories in Kabul that process and recycle it.
ولا خو غریبی د نو سبکه دی غریبی خو نه کیږي دغه څه کې ناسونه خو هغه خطر سره ومني سوال کې هغه کې غنه خو د خطر خبره.
Locals have to be careful because this land may never be fully cleared of explosives. This boy was 7 years old when a bomb shattered half of his skull. So how did such a risky business become the only option for so many in Afghanistan?
مونږه سخترین ځای دغه ده چې سار کې را پاتېږو ټوله ورځ سوجو شي کار به وسي او که به نه شي.
Salim lives in a small village northeast of Kabul.
دوام کوو هر چیز سره مخ کېږو ورځ کې لس ځلې داسې د بمي شیانو سره مخ کېږو.
He finds most of the weapons in Tangi Valley, one of Afghanistan's most heavily mined areas. This was always an important passageway for troops because it connects two major provinces close to the capital, Kabul.
دې له وجې هم راځي. اوس داسې کبالیان هم ډېر شوي دي چې
Salim carries the explosive scrap 6 miles away to his own little hideout to do the dangerous work of taking them apart.
چې حول خو له سرای نه لرې لاړ شو هلته بیا صفا کوو ځکه چې باید یو موږ ژوبل سو نور خلک ځان سره ضعیف نه کړو ژوبل نه کړو.
These are bases of mortar shells. The 6-fin design shows that they belong to the Soviet Army, who fought here from 1979 until 1989. Salim breaks the copper off the weapons. He can sell it for about $2 a pound.
تیز سرونه لري میخو غوندې میخونه هم تېروي چې معمولي ګوته ورسره ولګي داسې شي چې خپله حیران شي.
Some of these pieces can also cause tetanus since they are covered with decades of rust. High-caliber bullets like these can be explosive for years. Salim has had some close calls.
دا مونږ یو ټیم کې مرمۍ راوړه هغه نه دلته ما میس ماتول هغه زیاتې دوګۍ وکړو چې ایسته مې ورکړه هغه زیاتې ډز یې مو وکړو خلک هم ټول شو زیاتې مونږ ته هم په غوسه شو. په هغه ساعت کې مې همدا ویلې خو چې مړ خو دې شي خو چې لږ مجبوریتونه نه وای.
Most countries have already banned landmines, but the Russians planted hundreds of thousands of them here. And the Taliban used some of those old mines to fight against the US when it invaded in 2001. The US military says it did not use any over the 20-year war, but it left behind other lethal military waste, like unexploded grenades and mortars. A lot of that ends up at scrapyards like this. Muhammad Amin runs the biggest one in the valley.
دا خپل د ما پیرګری پیژنیم نه سه مثال دا ورچی شای دا عدالت سره راوړي زی نو ګورم سره دا شای خطرناک دا شای د سیل د سیل.
He buys everything from old buckets to tarps and rubber to one of the most valuable things he trades in.
دا شای میستا زیر دی کېبل دا.
Amin says about 25 people come to him daily. Some even find weapons around their homes, like bullets that contain lead and can cause rashes and even cancer. Collectors like Salim sometimes bring their scrap here. They can get just over $3 for about 15 pounds. Then it's transported to factories in Kabul. Since fuel costs are rising, they try to load up as much as possible in one trip. Omid Bashir works for one of the biggest steel mills in Kabul that turns scrap into metal bars. The factory does not accept weapons because it's too dangerous, but it does process metal parts if they're already separated from the explosives. They dump the scrap metal into the furnace, but sometimes mistakes happen.
چال تداکو مال زین وقت که خواهم که دشپی کار کهو که یا بند مال فب یا مرمی کلا چالو تدا رو دازو به جکڑا زان سرا یا په بوټو کې ولیدل دا یا په سر ولیدل یا په چټ ولیدل دا.
The melted scrap is turned into steel bars used for construction. The rest of this potentially explosive scrap is collected by demining organizations that safely dispose of it. Over the years, official efforts to remove landmines in Afghanistan have been few and far between. NGOs like the Halo Trust have stepped in.
د مهماتو ساحه کې خپل علي موجود دي د ماینونو ساحه کې مینفیل کې بټلفیل کې خپل علي موجود دي نظر په هغه الو مطابق مونږه مین کشف کو
بشیر خان در صورت که 4 تا آماده است امنیت تامین است میتونی اجرات کنی
About 160 people are killed or injured by explosive remnants of war every month in Afghanistan. And in 2021, nearly 80% of the casualties were children. Salahuddin has worn this hat for almost 3 years. He was just throwing stones around with his cousins when one of them hit a bomb. The explosion fractured his skull and damaged his brain. He had to learn how to walk again.
کله چې موږ درس ورته ووایو اول دا درس هغه ښه کاده است خو وروسته بیرته د ذهن نه یې وځي داسې
So Salahuddin has warned his friends to be careful. But Salim has to take his chances with this job because poverty has been on the rise since the Taliban took over in 2021. Western countries cut foreign aid and a financial crisis pummeled the country. 97% of the population is expected to fall below the poverty line before the end of this year. Even this simple meal Salim and his family are eating today is rare.
بعضی شی کور کې بعضی نه وي کې دا شی وي چې 2 میاشتې هم نه وي 1 میاشت هم نه وي وړو چې ختم شي دا کلی کور نه چې راخلو هغه هم نه ورکوي هغه سره خپله نه وي.
And if he didn't collect scrap, he says they'd have no food at all.
دا احساس کوو چې مونږ یعنی دې کې که سر وخورم پیسې داره نشته کې او چې نه کوم داره کارونه نشته او چې کوي دا دې باندې موږ مشکلات نه حل کېږي دې له وجې.
By trying to survive, waste pickers are providing an essential service, activists argue.
We don't want our waste, we reject our waste, but there is a lot of value in it.
Lucia Fernandez is the General Secretary of the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, an organization that represents workers from 35 countries.
We are hoping for waste pickers to have their own union and to formalize in order to have a proper recognition of the profession and recognition with protection.
Doing this job requires a lot of time on the road, and she's collected souvenirs along the way.
As you can see, it's like a patchwork, so it's recycled from the dam site. And my mom transformed this in the curtain for my children's bedroom.
Lucia says that just a few policy changes can transform life for waste pickers.
For example, if you get retired, you have a pension because you have been cleaning your city for 40 years or something like that. So social protection is very important.
At home in Montevideo, Uruguay, she does her best to make sure to sort her own trash for the waste pickers.
So you see, my sister says that I am a rich hipster recycling girl and I pay an extra fee for some private company, but still the problem is that this shouldn't be something that I need to be paying for in order to recycle my food. It should be a public system, but it isn't. Okay, here we go.
So far, the movement to organize has had success in many countries.
In Colombia, in Brazil, in Argentina, in South Africa, in India, in some places in North America, they start being recognized by their governments or by the municipalities, which is great.
In Brazil, pickers have worked as part of municipal waste collection since 1993. This crew was trained to sort trash after the 2014 World Cup. In Colombia, workers successfully amended the constitution. Now, they're paid as formal workers within the recycling system. In parts of Mexico, waste pickers wear uniforms, but receive no salary. They survive on tips. In November 2023, Lucia will head to Nairobi, Kenya, to take part in negotiations for the first ever global treaty that could restrict the production and disposal of plastic waste. She's pushing to include recognition of the huge contribution made by informal waste pickers.
Our plan is to lobby the governments, lobby in a good way, but to convince the governments that there are good models and good cases that we want to advocate for, and if they want to do something meaningful to reduce the plastic pollution, they need to partner with waste pickers. The best possible outcome is that the waste pickers are mentioned in the text.
Once people learn more about the lives of waste pickers, Lucia hopes that they'll focus on things that can really make a difference.
So to recognize them and to help them to fight for the rights and the proper decent living income, it's something that ideally we need to have governments in our side to help us to achieve that goal.